Hi, this is Kevin from Budibase. I'd like to show you today how we can use Budibase to build a graphical user interface to allow us to have CRUD functionality built on top of a REST API. A lot of jargon there. So I want to be able to create, read, update and delete, so CRUD, records using an API of some description, and to provide that in a graphical way so my users don't need to use any code, they can just point and click. Let's dive in. I'm in the Budibase admin panel and I'm going to click on Create New App. I'll start from scratch and this is going to be a computer REST API. I don't want the sample data, so I'll turn that off and I'll click Create App. In Budibase, we want to help you turn your data into action. And so the first thing we want to know is, where is your data? Where does it exist already? It could be in a database, relational or non-relational. It could be in a spreadsheet on Google Sheets or an Airtable. But maybe you only have access to the data through an API that someone else has built and provided for you. That's what I'm going to use today. So I'll click on REST API and continue. This is going to be an API that's going to allow me to create, read, update and delete, so use CRUD functionality for a resource called computers. So you might have this to manage your assets inside your data center or some other place you might have a whole load of computers. So I'm just going to call this a computer API. In this configuration, I'm going to build some queries in a few minutes. I've got headers and these can be added for every request that I'm sending. So I may have authentication being generated through a header where I have to pass on an API key for every request. I've got some authentication. So there are different authentication methods I could be using. I could be using basic auth, so that's username and password, or bearer token, where I'm sending a bearer token. If I create these here, they're available to every request. Equally, I've got some variables that are either dynamic or static that allow me to be able to pass information across requests. The API I'm going to be using today has no authentication, so I don't need to worry about that. We'll link to another video where we show how you can use different types of authentication when building REST API collections in Budibase. For now, I'm going to add a query, and this request is going to create a computer. So when we create computer, that's going to be a post request, and the endpoint I have for that is there. So to create this resource, I need to pass a JSON request body. So go to the body, I'll set it to JSON, and there are three fields I need to pass. The first is the name of the computer, what I'm going to call it. The second is the location of the computer, where I'm going to send it. And the third is the date added. So when was this computer added to our list? And if I send that request, I get a successful response back again, but all of these fields are blank. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not very helpful. I actually want to be able to fill in this information. And I don't want my user to have to come in here and fill in this request manually. I want to present them with a form that we will then use in some way here. So in order to be ready to receive those form inputs, I need to provide a place to catch them, as it were. And we do that with bindings. So in bindings, I want to create a binding for the name, the location, and the date added. And on the front end, I'm going to pass these through dynamically. For now, I'll send the name to be my computer, the location to be my room, and the date added to be the 1st of 2023. So in my body now, inside the quote, instead of having an empty string, I'll use handlebar notation, so double handlebars, and the name of the binding. So name, location, and date added. These have to match the bindings. They don't necessarily have to match the key. It's up to you to decide on how you want to handle that. So I'll press send now, and I'll see, brilliant. What I get back are the fields I had and this new ID that's there as well. I'll save this. It'll appear over here, and we've done the create of our CRUD. We've created a resource from an API request. We'll create the other queries, and then we'll build the front-end user experience afterwards. So once I've created, the next thing I want to do is read. So I want to read all the records. So inside of my REST, I'll click Add Query, and this is Read Computers. Now the good news is, it's a GET request, and I just have to do a get request and send it, and I get the data back again. In the panel at the bottom, I get a JSON response of one of the return objects. And here it looks like, brilliant, I've got lots of computers going on there, my very best computer, my best place, and some dates going on. If I look at the schema, I can see I've got the ID, which is text, the name, location, they're both text. Date added, it's actually a date time. And setting this to be a date time is going to help our front end be able to understand it better and display it better for our users. Raw is just showing what comes back again. Headers, again, we're seeing what we're getting. Preview shows us all of the rows that are available here. And dynamic variables we can create here if we wanted to. But that's it. I've got all computers, so I'll hit save. I've got recomputers. There are 3 more operations I want to do, and they are all about a single computer. So we've created a computer and we've read all the computers. I want the ability to read a single computer, update a single computer, and delete a single computer. And then we'll have finished our CRUD implementation. So back to REST, adding a query. This time we want to read single computer. And that's largely going to be the same, except we're going to need to pass in the ID. We'll save this for now. So I want to see the detail for this single computer. Brilliant. We get it back. Preview, we just get 1 record, which makes sense. So we only get 1. Brill. Except again, I don't want my user to have to enter this manually. So if we don't want it to enter manually, we want to receive it from the front end in some way. We need a way to receive that. We do that with a binding. I'll call this ID. And I'll bring this value that we had up there in here just as the default value is one that we're using. And I can use the bindings much like I did in the body in my actual query. So I can do double handlebars, ID. I can send that and I can save it. So that's my very best computer. If I get a different ID, so create a new one, get this different ID, and send this one, I'm getting the right details back again. So that's sending for an individual computer. Now we want to update. So let's duplicate this. And this is going to be update single computer. Update single computer. So again, we've got the ID, but now we also want bindings for the name, the location, and the date added. Let's save that. It's going to be a put request. The body's going to be JSON, and actually it's going to be the same as for the create computer. So let's go copy the body from the create computer, paste it into here. The schema, well, the date added should be a date time. And then let's use the default values just to test it's updating. So updated name, updated location, and the updated date will set to be 200101. Let's send that. Request did not return any data. Let's save this request, take this ID and go and check if it got updated. So we send this, updated name, updated location, 2000. Brilliant. So we've created, we've read, and we've updated. The last thing we want to do is delete a single computer. So this is going to be delete a computer. And all we'll do is we'll change the verb from put to delete. We don't need these other bindings, just need ID. So if we send that now, didn't return any data. If we tried to retrieve it now though, we're getting a 404. It's not found. Brilliant. So now we've got all of the queries we need to have full CRUD functionality on this resource. We can create, read, update and delete. Now we need to build the front end. So we go to design and let's build the create functionality first. So I'll click into components. I'll add a component of a form, because I want to get the data from my user. And so I'll need a text field inside my form for the computer name. So I'll put name field, call this name. It's going to say computer name, and we're done. I then want the location field. So location field, location, computer location, and we're done. Lastly, I want to add a date picker field. And this is going to be my date field. So it's date underscore added, date added. We have our full form. So name this create computer form. So in these fields, we can collect our details from our users, but we can't actually do anything with them yet. We need to put a button in. So I'll add a button right up top beside the form. So let's give it a top margin of 12 pixels. So it's spread out a little bit. Let's change its label. So it says add new. We'll send the name of it to the add button. And when we click it, it won't do anything yet because we haven't set any click action. So on click, We want it to execute query. Query we want to happen is in REST. We want to create a computer. And then we've got the bindings that we create on the back end that we need to map to something in the front end. So the name, we want that to happen from the form, the name field. I'm hitting the lightning bolt because it's dynamic, not something that's going to be set all the time like my room. Instead, lightning bolt, create search, and location. And lightning bolt, create search form, and date added. We can click preview. We can see this in the front end and we can create a new computer. So we can say brand new computer in my living room, and the date added we can set to be the 23rd of June. Did anything happen? Let's check. If I go back to my data layer, if I get all computers, look at preview and scroll down, I see brand new computer in my living room. So it did get created, but nothing happened to show us that it did get created. So let's fix that. I'll do that in a couple of ways. Well, first of all, we will create a data provider that's going to get all computers using our read computers. And inside of my data provider, I want to put a table. It's going to be my computers table. All my data is here. I can hit configure columns and think, actually, I don't want that ID. So I'll add those. Here we go. Looks a bit nicer. And so when I press this button, I want it to refetch this table. And in Budibase, we call that refreshing the data provider. And for this button to be able to trigger that refresh, it needs to be nested somewhere underneath this data provider. So let's bring this form just inside the data provider and let's give it another action. Other action I want it to do is to refresh the data provider and then clear the form. Try it now. So computer name, maybe it's the best ever. Location, the best place. And date added, let's do the 1st of June, 2023. It's add new. It's appeared down here in the list. Form has been cleared. So now we've created a new computer and we're able to read those computers. The next thing I'd like to happen is when I click on one of these rows, I would like a little panel to appear from the right showing me the details of that particular computer. So let's see how we might do that. First of all, I'm going to add a side panel and I'll call this my update panel. We'll see why in a minute. And inside of here, I think the best way to be able to see what's inside here would be have basically this form repeated, but with the details here filled out. So I'll copy that form and I'll bring it inside of here. I'm going to change this name just so I'm aware this is the update computer form. So when I click a row, I would like each of those fields in my update panel to be filled in. So how do I do that? Well, when I click on the table, on the configuration on the right-hand side, it has this on row click section. So I click define actions and I want to do a couple of things. I want to update some field values and I want to update the field values of the update computer form. But again, we've got a nesting issue. My update computer form needs to be updated by the computers table, but the computers table is not nested underneath it. So I need to do a bit of jiggling about here. So I'm going to bring my update computer form up to this level. I'm going to bring my computers table inside of my form. I'm going to bring my update panel also inside of my form. And then I'm going to bring my fields back inside my update panel. Put them in the right order. So inside my form, I have my table and my panel, which contains the fields from my form. So back to my computer, on row click, define actions, looking at a field value. I want to update the update computer forms, set the value of the name field be what? Well, I want it to be the name value of the current clicked field. And I can do that with this lightning bolt again. Computers table, clicked row, dot name. I want to do that for the other two fields. So field, update computer form, location, computers table, clicked row, dot location. And one more, field, update computer form, date added, lightning bolt, computers table, clicked row, dot date underscore added, and I'll save. So when I click on one of these rows, it's filling in the fields in our form, but we also need to see the form. So I need one more action in my define actions, add action. I want to open a side panel. Which side panel? Our update panel, and I'll save. Let's preview and see how that looks. So my second best computer, my computer in my room, brill, the best ever, amazing. Okay, so we can create a new computer, we can read all the records and we can read a single record. The next thing I want to do is update a single record. And actually we're almost there. So I want to be able to say really the best ever here. And so I'm going to do that by updating this form. So let's go see what's going to happen here. So this add button, well, this is actually now an update button. We'll call this update. And so in the actions, instead of creating a computer, we want to update a single computer. We still want to refresh the data provider. We still want to clear the form. And another action we want to do is we want to close the side panel, because once the side panel has done its work, we can just clear it and move it out of the way. But this execute query updates single computer. We have the name, the location, and the date added, but we don't have the ID, and we don't want someone to have to look that up and work out how to do that. So how do we get the ID? Well, what we'll do is when the row is clicked, we will set a state variable, which is available anywhere in our application. And then we'll pick up that state variable at this point when we're sending the request. So I'll go back to my table, my define actions. I'm going to say add action. I'm looking for a state value, update state. I want to set a value. I'm going to call this selected row ID. It's going to be a dynamic value. So I'll hit the lightning bolt. It's going to be computers table, clicked row, and it's _ID. And I'll save that. So now when I click one of these rows, the ID is being set. And so in my update button, back on my execute query for my update computer, the ID now is going to be lightning bolt. It's going to be state selected row ID, and we can save and save. Let's preview and see how that looks. I'll say the best ever has been moved to server room 1. I'll click update, and that's been updated. Click in here, you can see it's there and ready to go. So I can create records, I can read records, I can update records. Now what about deleting? I'd like to delete this empty row, which is from when we tested our API with empty strings earlier on. The most logical thing would be to have a delete button in here, so I can get rid of a record. So let's add that. So inside of this panel, right at the top, I want to add a container. And this is going to be my delete button container. And the reason I want that is that I want to horizontally align my button right to the end, the right hand side. So I'll add a button inside of here. I would like it to be a warning button because it's destructive. I'm going to call this my delete button. It's going to say delete. And when I click it, I'll define some actions. So when I click it, I want to execute a query from my REST API. I want to delete a single computer. And which computer do I want to delete? The one with ID, which is my state value, the one I set when I click the row. Now, I'd quite like to require confirmation here for it to say, are you sure you want to delete this record? And I'll save. Now, I also want this panel to close so it's gone and we can move on. So I'll add action and I'll close the panel. And the last thing I want to do is to refresh the data provider so the table knows that that record has been deleted. So let's test that out. I'll click on the empty row. I'll press the delete button. Are you sure you want to delete this record? I'll confirm, and it's gone. There's one more tidy up thing I'd like to do, which is this form here now looks a bit ugly and out of place. I'd like to move it into a side panel as well, so that maybe there's an add new button, but it stays here. When I click the add new, this panel comes over and we're able to add it. Let's do that, shall we? So another side panel. This is going to be my create side panel. I'll bring it up to where it was before. I'll bring my form inside it. And so then the last thing I want is just a button above my table, which is going to open that side panel. Okay, so I'll just add a button, move it to be just above here. And let's just call it add new open panel button. And so the only action this button will do is it will open the panel or create side panel. And for our side panel button, we'll just add a final action to close the panel. Alrighty, so we've got a list of all of our computers. We can update them. So server room 2, we can delete them, we can read them, and we can also add new. We can say last computer in the last place it's been added on that date there. Okay, last computer, last place, and it's been added there. I've shown you how you can build a graphical user interface in Budibase on top of a REST API. You can create, read, update, and delete records. And you can apply this to any REST API where you've got access to those resources. As I said earlier in the video, all of these API routes are unprotected. Often we might need to send authentication query strings or some other way to prove that we're allowed access to that data. And you can follow another video, which we'll link to above, to to be able to help find out about that. With an application like this, users on their mobile phones and desktops can get access to the data that's normally trapped inside of a REST API and make decisions about their next actions, allowing them to be more effective and productive as they handle their jobs. What REST APIs can you use to enrich the experiences of your colleagues and help them do their jobs better? Have fun exploring and make sure you subscribe for more tutorials like this one.